Policies. Dr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 10A is actually a new policy on school system use of owned or leased vehicles. And this is something that I think is a good structure for us to have in place, and to make sure there's a clear policy around it. And then we appreciate the support and review of the law director's office on that one as well.
Ms. Bounds.
Yes, I saw where Mr. Buke had approved the form, so I too wanted to make sure that it complies with the law, and that if there's any changes that we make those. But Dr. McIntyre, how large is the fleet that the administration uses? Do you have a total number of vehicles?
Again, I'll defer to Mr. Oakes, although really it's the fleet is really vehicles used in maintenance and in food service, and a couple of vehicles used in information technology, I think, is the bulk of it. Mr. Oakes?
The largest single component in the fleet is maintenance, and Mr. French get up and leave.
He just stepped out.
He has impeccable timing. But and the maintenance fleet will be 250 vehicles in that neighborhood, and then the remainder of our fleet is probably another 75 vehicles or so. So we're in the neighborhood of 300 vehicles in the fleet.
Okay, and one additional question. It said the director of schools may assign vehicles to employees or the director's designee. Who's the director's designee in this matter?
That would have to be determined after the policy is in place, and he would designate individuals who would make those assignments. Generally, for example, Mr. French assigns in maintenance who is responsible for a vehicle and who operates it, and I would expect that Mr. French would be one of the superintendent's designees.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion about 10A? Ms. Sanger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Law Director, I'd just like to thank you. I did notice that the stamp was on there, like Ms. Bound said, and I appreciate that. I think that'll help us all moving forward.
All right, we'll move to 10B, discussion and possible action on the Knox County Board of Education Policy DM, Grants Management. Do you wish to say anything, Dr. McIntyre? Ms. Bounds and Ms. Roundtree had it put on there. Which one of you wants to talk first?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Bounds. I just wanted to bring this item before the board and request that we revise policy DM, grants management, to be in compliance with Tennessee Code Annotated.
Ms. Bounds, do you have any, or you just?
No, I was
agree?
going to ask the law director, can we bring that into compliance? Is that possible?
Law Director?
The major problem with the actual DM policy as it relates to grants, the state statute requires this board to apply for and receive all grants by resolution, and therefore it's hard to delegate something that's required by resolution. So DM would be very difficult. I don't know how you would get it into compliance when the total power and authority of receiving and implementing grants are by resolution of this board as required by state statute. Not looking at DM on its face, just because it is a policy whereby grants are to be accepted or to be delegated to be accepted, and the statute really does not comport to have that possibility. From a functional standpoint, it's not that difficult to whereby other boards look, for example, notary republics. They go through this whole process, but in the end, it has to be approved by resolution of the county commission. So you can make a resolution whereby the administration, this is more of a procedure than a policy, the administration could apply for grants. meaning literally, physically, bring those grant applications before the board for resolution to apply. In other words, we're going to apply for these, and you all make the resolution. Then you get them. And we have the potential to accept these grants. That comes back before the board. Here's a list of them, and you all pro forma, if you wish, to, by resolution, accept those grants. And then from that, the law director or whatever, depending on whether it's contract, how all of that comes together legally, then would come back before this board for contract. It depends then whether it's a matching grant or whether it's just a full funded grant as to what would happen then. So as far as DM's concerned, statutorily, the total responsibility of grants belong to the board, and then after receiving has to notify, if I recall, the county legislative body, I believe it's within 7 days, I don't have it in front of me, to notify them that you've received a grant, or it has to be deferred to the legislative body if there is matching funds. So I don't know how, DM, I don't know what you would do with a DM since it's required by resolution. That's the real difficult thing to answer. So
Could it's my understanding that there are a number of the grants that we receive or have received that are small. But this doesn't get around the fact that the board would still have to receive it at some point. But we could have once the board agreed on a dollar figure, all the grants below that figure placed on a consent grant.
You could do as far as your agenda, you can do anything you want to with your agenda.
Okay.
But it doesn't give a dollar figure. It just says grants, and it talks about federal, state, private in the act. Has to be received by this board by resolution.
Okay.
And so, how you do that in an agenda, you could actually, just like they basically do, almost pro forma, like I was saying earlier, on grants that come through the legislative body, on almost line item transfers at many times, or that's similar. I was trying to think of the other thing that comes through. What I'd say, the notary publics.
Right.
It's just things you do, but it's required by statute. You just are the ones that have to do it.
Okay. Dr. McIntyre, we'll go to you and then to Ms. Carson.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Law Director, so I looked at the, obviously the memorandum, and then the section that you cited was Tennessee annotated section 49-2-203, subsection B15. And in that section, it says appropriations of federal or private grant funds shall be made upon resolution passed by local board of education. So I understand the need to think about the policy in terms of receiving of grants, but appropriations of federal or private grants doesn't necessarily imply that the board has to approve the application of those grants.
It starts off within its very beginning, applying and receiving of grants, and then it goes to enumerate those types of grants that you're applying for and receiving, and in the end it says they shall be done by resolution of the board.
It says the appropriation shall be done upon resolution of the board.
Well, the whole action is the appropriation of the board. Everything from the appropriation, meaning that this grant's coming in, they have to apply for it, you have to get the grant, you have to receive the grant, and then they have to do by resolution this granting activity. Just like the county commission then has to be notified within 7 days of the receipt of that. So it is a procedural thing. And that's the way the statute's written. That's the way the statute has been interpreted.
Can the application of grants be delegated to the superintendent of schools?
You could put together a process for Knox County whereby these applications, you know that, okay, you've got, a bunch of applications that you want to do. You put those together, you list those applications, you bring them to this board on any given meeting, and it's almost pro forma on consent that this board by resolution accepts the application to apply for these grants. Then when they come back and you get them, you bring them before this board to be received. Then the contracts are prepared, and you go from there. then you all will receive the contracts and execute them by resolution. And that's the whole step process. It's kind of an integrated process according to the statute. So from an administrative standpoint, you can have the staff that's looking for, seeking, writing grant applications and all that. You just inform the board. I don't see, it's kind of like the other topic. I don't see the board denying application of grants, but it's their job to do that. So you put together, like you do your consent calendar, under your grants, you say approval of grant applications and just list them. And if they have any questions about them at that time, they can ask you. And if not, it all boils down to, transparency and then following the rule of law, and that's kind of what it does. So that's the way I would try to approach it if I were there.
I understand the recommendation, but my question was, can the board delegate that authority to the superintendent?
The board cannot delegate the authority that's required by resolution. And that statute requires a resolution of applying for and receiving grants and also the contracts. So I don't believe that they can delegate that authority.
Dr. May.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think if that's the law director's position, it does create some practical realities that it will be challenging in that we apply for grants continuously throughout the year, and oftentimes the grant application deadlines do not fall neatly into the board's agenda timelines. So it could be challenging. We might have to have a lot of Friday afternoon special called meetings if that's the case. And I joke, but we often will have a grant opportunity that will be announced one week and a grant deadline be a week and a half or 2 weeks later, so that could be extraordinarily challenging.
Ms. Carson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It would be my recommendation that we do with this policy like we do every policy that ever comes up that we have questions about and we feel it needs to be changed. Refer it to staff to look at it, do some research, look at I looked just quickly, and almost every school system that I looked at the 4 bigs first, but then from there has a grant application policy, or a grant management policy. So I think let's look at what current standard practice is and let staff bring back a policy to the board to look at. To me, this meeting is about policies that we have right now to look at, to vote on Wednesday. And right now, we've basically got nothing. That kind of recommendation, if Amber expressed her concerns about it and can go directly to the superintendent to say, can we get staff to deal with what we have in the law director's opinion that's in conflict with what we have in policy, and bring back something for the board to consider. Because at this point, we could debate it all night and still have nothing to consider and nothing to decide on. So my recommendation would be that they do that, look at standard practice, and then let's iron out the differences. If we're the only ones who are being held under a law that says you have to, I personally disagree strongly with the idea that I'm going to be approving an application with the understanding that I'm not even going to bother to read it. And when you look at the number of applications, the truth is there's no way we're going to read all those applications. And so, that we also may work with our legislators next year to make it something that's much more manageable. But at this point, without a policy before us to decide, I would just ask that you, as the chair, consider directing staff, if the board tends to agree with that, to look at this issue and come back with a recommendation.
Law Director, are you comfortable with that?
I don't have any problem with whatever policy this board wants to deal with. I was just giving you the opinion of what the statute says as to, and I even gave you a way that you might be able to do it. Whether you read or do your diligence or not is, I'm not getting into that. The idea is that these things be put before this board. Even if you have one on 2 weeks' notice, there's nothing to keep them from physically applying and you all approving that application. In other words, you have to approve the application. you have to approve the grant by resolution. It can't just be done, get the money, do a contract, and nobody know about it.
And it has to be, it would be something that would have to be approved in an assembled meeting.
Yes.
It can't be approved
By a committee or by one individual, no.
Well, could
Or
it be
by-
with the executive committee and then ratified by the full board? That's what I think I just heard you, I'm talking about the application.
Okay, the applications themselves, here's something, and this is all procedural now. How you want to go about approving, how you want to go about garnering applications is probably the way you're doing it. You have a committee or a department, I don't know exactly how you all do it, but
I
I
think
mean.
a person, no.
Okay, you have a person that's a grant writer, and their job is to write grants, and they're seeking these things. So they're out there. So this month, we have, with Dr. McIntyre's guidance, we have sent out 10 proposals for grants. Those 10 are listed. They come before the board. The board approves applying for those grants. Some of them they may like or not like, and they may not approve. So even if we get them, we don't take them.
But my question was this, I thought I heard you say, you can even go ahead and send the application in and get, you don't have to hold off on the application, I heard you say.
Yeah, I mean, those are procedural issues, however this board wants to go about doing it, but the application itself has to be approved by resolution. So those
Understood, so I'm
applications-
still just trying to just clarify
It's a
the
timing thing.
procedure. You're not saying that that we have to hold off on sending in that application. You're just saying at some point, as early as possible in the process, the board has to approve the application.
The board has to approve all applications and all grants and contracts by resolution.
Could this occur if we were on a real short time frame and the board was not
As long as this board,
designated to meet in the next few days? Could the application itself, the approval, go by email of the majority of the individual board members as far as applying for the grant?
well, the approval, it just says that it doesn't give a timeline. It just says that this board has to approve all applications and all grants. Whether it's before the fact or after the fact, it says they have to approve the applying and the grant. However, you set up a process to do that. Is not, I don't see that it
Okay.
precluding Dr. McIntyre's point. I don't think you have to have special call meetings to get things done. That's what I'm saying. I kind of disagree with that, but that's a policy issue and I'm not into that. You know what I'm saying? What it says is that this board has to approve by resolution. I'm just giving you the law. I'm not getting into how you're going to do it. That you have to approve by resolution the application, you have to approve by resolution the grant. If it involves a contract, then you have to approve the contract. It just is.
Okay.
And it cannot, that part cannot be delegated.
All right. Ms. Hill?
Is the issue, I'm asking, I guess, Ms. Bounds and Ms. Roundtree, is the issue that we apply, what we apply for, is the issue what we accept, not apply for, but what we accept? Is the issue that if we accept and we are obligated to matching funds, that sometimes this all appears to happen, before we are aware of it? I'm asking.
I think these two particular that we're going to look at next, the Broad and the Achieve, is what initiated the concerns. I think we're dealing with two separate matters here. We're looking right now at board policy, and if DM is in compliance, if we have been, as a board, doing this in the correct way, like county commission does it. But I think the two particular ones that we're going to look at next is what initiated this concern. And so that has led to looking at, just as I suggested at the last meeting, that I feel like this board needs to go through the policy manual and align our policies. And this is just another indication that our policies do not align. And so this to me is separate in kind of from the other two, but that's what I think where the original concern came from on my part. Because I heard Dr. McIntyre announce at the State of the Schools about us receiving the Achieve grant, and I kept waiting for it to come before the board for some kind of discussion or approval, and it never did. And in our monthly one-on-one meetings, I asked him about that, and then was referred to DM, and that because it's under a certain amount, we didn't have to, so we never saw that as a board. So that's where my concern was originally.
Ms. Fugit?
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Ms. Bounds, I just want to say what I also said last month, which is we do go through our policies on we bring policies every month, and every month that I have been on the board for the last 5 years, we are continually going through every policy, starting and working our way down. So, and I will also say that the entire time I was chair of the board, someone from the law director's office sat with us as we reviewed the policies. So I just want the community to understand that it's not like we have been purposely breaking the law or trying to circumvent the law, which your comment, I think, could maybe lead people to believe. And I know that's not your intent, but that could be how that was construed, because when you said, once again, our policies don't meet the law, we go by the good faith effort that we got when we were doing these policies. And when the law director's office is sitting there as we're writing policies and they don't tell us they violate the law, we assume they are compliant. So I agree with you. We don't need to beat this horse to death. I just suggest that now that this issue has been raised, they're concerned by board members that this policy isn't working for us, and they asked the law director for a legal opinion that he gave to some board members that this does not meet the law, then I suggest that we turn it over to staff, ask them to do the due diligence that we always ask them to do, check with the other school systems in the state. I'm sure we're not the only people that deal with this, and bring us back a policy that we then vote up or down or tweak like we always do.
So is it my understanding that the staff develops the board policies?
We usually ask the staff in conjunction with the law director's office. There's a committee that writes these. They bring them to us, and as we do every month, the policy's there, we read it, we either agree with it, disagree with it, we ask for changes in language, but we as a board don't sit down and write every policy. We have staff that brings to us with their expertise some best recommendations, and then that's our job as the board to question, challenge, or change the policy at every meeting.
Dr. McIntyre.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, we've also offered an opportunity to board members, and as Ms. Fugit said, we go through these policies on a regular basis, and we've essentially gone through every section, and then we go back to the beginning again and go through every section again. And we offer opportunities for school board members to participate in those conversations if they wish to in the detailed level. So as we go through a particular section, to spend a few hours and sit with our staff and with representatives from law director's office and to dig into the details. Sometimes board members take us up on that, sometimes they do not. But we do try to diligently review a section at a time periodically, and to try to run through those on a very regular basis. Typically it's about a section, I would say about a section per semester, roughly, or sometimes some of the bigger ones like the HR sections or the student sections might take a full year. But we have gone through and typically gone through those on a regular basis and offered opportunities for board members, if they wish to be a part of that detailed conversation. But certainly that comes to the full board once those reviews have been completed and recommendations are developed.
Doesn't it take, I know it varies sometimes, but somewhere I heard it takes somewhere between 3 and 4 years to go through the entire thing. Ms. Sanger.
Mr. Law Director, is it your opinion that any school, Knox County school employee has to, any Knox County school employee will then have to get an application, if they make an application or send out an application, are they then going to have to bring it up before this board? Because, if you think about it, teachers fill out grant applications all the time. And I know you said binding contract, but a contract doesn't just mean services. It could mean, hey, I'm going to apply for $10,000 for something. I get it, but I agree in my contract that I'm going to spend it this way. So, I know at certain schools too, even teachers fill out little mini grant applications, but sign contracts with their PTA and foundations to go do professional development. And so I guess I'm just sort of wondering, how far do we take that, if it's any school employee?
Mr. Armstrong.
Talk about all the time
Yeah.
that's going to take as well.
Well, the law's real clear. This has no ambiguity in terms of the implementing and receiving of grants. It shall be done by resolution. If these teachers, there's no reason why they can't come up with the, okay, basically I've got whatever X number $100 from the PTA. I don't know, what, then we get into what is really a grant and what is a gift. But I think the formal grant applications of grantee, grantor type relationships have to come before this board. Is it a PTA gift? Is it a gift from a private person? If y'all define that, and I'll have to look if you want me to, but if it's a grant, then you approve the application and you approve the grant. And if there's a contract that is a gift to Knox County, it has to be received by this board. Commission has to do the same thing for everything else throughout Knox County government. They have to receive every gift, every grant.
Right.
And
time frame wise too, I know last year, I think even a teacher in an elementary school found out last minute within 3 days of a professional development opportunity at Vanderbilt for gifted and talented program. So, to get that approved that quickly, it is going to be, that's going to be hard. And, I just think that, I think it might be going a little overboard if we're asking teachers to do that. And I understand that your opinion, but apparently we have to. I'm just going to make sure that I'm telling them to email you, just so we're clear.
that'll be fine. I'm just telling you what the statute says. If it becomes a burden, the state legislatures, it's their schools, and I've got no problem going to Nashville and helping you get something changed. You see what I'm saying? I work both ways. You ask me what time it is, I'll look at my watch, I'll just tell you what it says.
Ms. Roundtree.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I was thinking, and this was at a TSBA continuing ed thing that I was at, there were board members from other boards there that said they go through their policy book piece by piece. And I just looked really quickly back at our old agendas. In January, we didn't review any policies. In February, we reviewed a policy from Section E. In March, we reviewed a policy from Section G. So I guess my thinking, and I could be speaking incorrectly for Ms. Bounds, I was thinking we would go in order and review the policies. Just that was something that seemed fairly common from other boards that I had talked to at this TSBA training. I'm not seeing a rhyme or reason to this, I guess. So I understand that we're reviewing policies at the time there might be questions or changes, but I was thinking more of a systematic review.
I'm going to go to Dr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
that.
And I would suggest that we do a systematic review, but Mr. Oaks, do you want to weigh in?
Yes, sir. We are required statutorily to go through and review all of our policies biannually. Every 2 years, we have to go through the book. And we just completed going through the book early this past summer, and we'll need to initiate that process again in the coming summer. And what we do goes back to the process that Dr. McIntyre described, is we'll set a series of meetings to look at specific sections within the policy or the policy manual. For example, sections A through C or A through D we may do at one meeting because those sections of the manual are limited. They're small. There's not a lot of policies in there, and a lot of the policies that are in there are brief. So we'll set something up. We'll invite the board members who want to attend to come in, and we'll sit down, and what we have done is gone through the policies line by line. And it's been laborious, and we may spend 4 or 5 hours on an afternoon going through it. But we get through that, and then we'll put the changes together and the recommendations, and we'll bring those to the full board to act upon.
We're getting a little off topic here, I think, with reviewing a policy and stuff. We're going to take a break here in a minute, but Ms. Bounds, if you have a comment, go right ahead.
No, I guess it was in regard to what Ms. Fugit said, and it was never my intention to, to say that we have not been reviewing our policies. From where I have been with the TSBA and at the National School Boards Association, and I can do some more research on this, but in the conferences I went to, they talk like their board looked at their policies every month in their meetings. So I guess I'm just not real familiar with us allocating that to staff, and it's okay, maybe that's how other school systems do it. It's just not what I learned at the National School Board Association in my conferences that I attended. It was the boards that looked at their policies at their meetings, section by section, each month.
Do you
So,
really
I don't know.
Do you really believe everything that the TSBA says, too? you don't have to answer that.
I would love to, but
Miss-
I'll hold off.
Ms. Dethridge.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I have been going ever since I've been on this board, and I have never heard of a board that says they do every month go through all these policies. We have policies just about every other month. If we missed a couple of months, we missed a couple of months. But as long as I've been on this board, we have had policies on the agenda. If not every month, I guarantee you it's less than 2 or 3 or 4 times a year that we don't have them. But that's part of what we do, and that is part of our charge. I do agree with you. That is part of our charge. And I feel like if we have a problem with a policy the same way you do now, bring it to the board, and let's discuss it, and let's get everybody, the people that are responsible for going through the policies, go through the policies, make changes, bring recommendations back to this board, and we discuss it as we are here today. But, like you said, we're just going into a whole new, different discussion on this policy. But if it's a concern that we don't do policy, which we do, and if it's a concern with this particular policy, let's just address it and move on.
Thank you. Ms. Carson.
Thank you. I will also add, I have been to the same kind of meetings from NSBA, and I think what board members say is we review all our policies, meaning that when they say we, it doesn't mean that the board at each meeting sits and reviews every policy. It means somebody reviews them all. Those that need to be revised, just rescinded or renewed, come before the board. I've yet to speak to any board members that sit there with the books and go through them all by themselves. We also can pull up old emails over the last 3 years that show every invitation to all board members for the sections, and then you can look in the next month on the agendas in the past to see that we actually did do the work. What we don't do as a board is sit here and try to write policy, because it ends up being exactly what we've now experienced. 45 minutes of talking, we still don't have a single word in the policy, because you need to just give it to staff, say, these are our concerns, these are the things we want addressed, let them bring it back to us so that we can move forward. And that's the purpose. It's not to give away our job or to avoid it. It's to do it efficiently so that it gets done, and it gets done with some expertise, and then gets the board's changes and approval.
That would seem reasonable to me. I'm going to let you speak in just a second, Ms. Roundtree, but it would seem reasonable if y'all have things that you want raised, then issues, give them to staff, let them develop something, and they could always be placed on the agenda and modified if you wish to to change them. With the, with 5 votes, you could do whatever as far as changing the policy. Yes. Ms. Roundtree.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to, just my general concern about the policies, and I know we're way off track. I'll just briefly point this out. A lawsuit that had to be settled earlier this year was due to a policy, from my looking, that was issued in 1995 and had never been revised. So my concern is just that, is there, maybe those folks aren't going through the policies, but from the folks I talked to, it sounded like it was a continual revision process that they were involved in. And so that was where my concern in getting this policy DM revised so we're in compliance with Tennessee code came from. Thank you.
Ms.
Just-
Carson.
I'll be very quick. If there is a policy that doesn't need revision, or as they review it, they don't see a need to revise it, now what we can do is mark a review date on there so that there's documentation that they were reviewed, but if the law had not changed or something in the most recent review, it may not be revised, or if people were not aware. And I will say, at all those policy reviews, the law department is there. Now we're making it clean now by making them, or asking them to please sign each one. But I will guarantee you, every debate we've had, because I've sat there and had a policy that has been pulled from the agenda in those agenda meetings because the law department had concerns. So it wasn't like they had to be specifically asked. That was their role at the meeting, and they're part of the review policy. So yes, you may be able to find one that says, oh, it should have been changed, but it doesn't mean it wasn't reviewed, and it doesn't mean that they're not doing the job. And I would suggest that you go back and look through the records if you want to see all the policies that have been revised, or we can choose to move forward, deal with this issue, and deal with it in whatever fashion we want in the future.
The next 2 items are going to generate a fair amount of discussion, I believe. So let's take a break and be back at 7:05. By the clock back here, we will come back into session. Before we go to the next item, I'm going to, without objection from another board member, I'm going to refer that last item to staff to review and possibly come up with some changes or additions.
DM.
Is there any objection to that? Hearing none, that will be the order. Now, we go to 11A, grants, 11A, approve application for and receiving of grant from the Road Resident Program for the period of August 25, 2014 through July 30th, 2015 in the amount of $29,700 and matching amount of $60,300. It's recommended by the superintendent. Dr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, 11A and 11B are 2 grant agreements that I brought forward to the Board of Education based on the law director's opinion and memorandum that he sent a week or 2 ago. And also note that on 11A, the law director in his memorandum made several very specific suggestions around language and identified several concerns around language. And I did ask the staff at the Broad Center if they would be amenable to those changes, and they were. And so there's at least a proposed revised grant agreement appended to this item, and then you see the Achieve grant as well in item 11B.
Ms. Barnes.
Okay, While I don't agree with the Broad, it is my concern that the superintendent act for this board and seeing that the laws relating to the schools and rules of the state and the local Board of Education are faithfully executed. And I feel like in some ways this superintendent has misled and deceived this board. And now in bringing about these revisions is asking us to fix something where we did not comply with the law. And here are some of my concerns enumerated. One, it is the superintendent's duty to protect this board and make sure everything is done in compliance with the law. Number two, the superintendent has no authority to accept or apply for a grant without permission of the board. Number three, the superintendent applied and accepted the grant in violation of the state law. Four, the superintendent signed and negotiated a contract to bind Knox County schools and Knox County without the power to do so. And the superintendent reviewed a contract and reviewed it as to its legal form without the law director. And six, the superintendent has hired under a grant which is not enforced. So, you know, through these behaviors, I think we're getting very dangerously close to a level of cause. And so it's my opinion that now he wants us to approve these actions once again by asking us to make this okay as a board, and I just don't feel like that is what we need to do.
Dr. McIntyre?
I would only note that school board policy both explicitly authorizes the superintendent to accept grants that are, to apply for grants and to accept grants under certain circumstances. And my actions in this matter were taken in good faith and based on my understanding of school board policy, which had been reviewed by the law director's office when last updated. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Roundtree?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My understanding is that in the law director's memo regarding this original agreement, there were some specific language changes. I would just like to ask the law director to comment. Has the current attached version that the Broad Center sent over also been reviewed by the law department for legal form?
Okay, the current one that was just referred to?
Yes.
Or okay, the one that we've talked about. I have it on my desk. I have not reviewed it. Dr. McIntyre sent it over to me, was yesterday, Thursday. And I haven't reviewed it yet. According to our conversation, it is matching what I put down earlier. But to answer your question, I don't know the answer to your question yet because I haven't reviewed it yet, so I really don't want to say yes, but I assume that it has. I'll review it as soon as I can get to it and get it on the agenda for your review. But I don't know what's attached. I didn't look at what's attached. I looked at what was sent over, truthfully.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Law Director. And then I had a question just about the Achieve and why it was titled a sub-grant agreement. I didn't know if it's tied specifically to another grant. I was just.
Yeah, that's the next one.
I mean, the superintendent mentioned both of those when he was discussing grants. So I didn't know if you could speak to the language of the sub-grant.
Let's deal with the first one, and then we'll get to that one. I'll come back to you. Ms. Carson, do you want to comment on?
Yeah, my question is, I mean, this went to your office on Thursday and it's on our agenda. Can we expect to have your opinion, your review of it prior to our vote on Wednesday?
Right, I'm going to try to have it, and then I'll either have it attached, I don't know whether I can get it to get attached, or I'll have it ready to be handed out for your review. Yeah, I'll try to get to it tomorrow.
Have what attached? I'm sorry.
The one that the copy that we're talking about.
So it's attached right now, but you'll put on the bottom if you reviewed it?
Right.
Okay, that's all I'm asking.
I'll give you something before you
Wednesday.
vote on it.
Okay, that's all I'm asking. Thank you.
So basically, let me see if I understand this correct, Mr. Law Director. You think that we can accomplish where we want to go all on Wednesday night if you get the agreement?
Well, you can and you can't. You will accomplish what this board needs to do, but then it has to go to commission because it has a matching grant. And then they will do whatever they do with it. And then it has a contract with a matching grant with non-appropriations. And so this
So
board will have
would
to
it
send it over.
Will this board have to see it? Should this board vote on Wednesday night and then send that on to commission, will the board have to see anything related to this again?
Should not, if everything goes well on the other side. I don't see
Okay,
why not.
okay. That was.
Unless I run into something when I'm I haven't reviewed it. I mean, I'm just going on good faith that everything's fine. I'm making that assumption. Once I read it, and I'll try to get to it tomorrow, read it, and then I'll mark up. I may have to call Dr. McIntyre. We may have to do some quick
Okay.
phone call or, stuff. But if we can get it all worked out, and if it's perfect right now, you have no problems. If
Okay.
not, then.
That was where I was going.
Yeah.
Could it be
It's possible.
totally by this board, whatever the board needed to do? I understand the commission going to the commission,
Right.
but.
It is possible.
It's possible
Yes.
for it to be disposed of.
Yes.
On
Wednesday
Wednesday
night.
night.
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna make a comment or two here, just generally speaking. I think sometimes that we've talked a lot about board policy, and we need to keep in mind that it is just board policy. It's something that the board has approved. If it if it interferes with state or federal law, even though it might not be immediately recognizable, just because it's in board policy. And I'm not saying that that applies here. It's immaterial whether you think it does or whether it doesn't. We just need to keep that in mind. And since none of the board members nor Dr. McIntyre are attorneys, to my knowledge, we are dependent upon the opinion that the law director renders to us, whether we agree with it or not. And hopefully all this will be worked out. But if things like this do not get worked out, and then it's discovered that something is actually illegal, it could well be an issue and cause problems for either this board or some board in the future. And it could come back to create a problem with whoever the superintendent was. So we need to get this right, and we need to make sure that, in my opinion, that if there's any, even if not in this case, but if situations similar arise and there's some debate as to whether it's legal or not as far as the policy, then we need to find out about it before we continue to vote on it. Now, Ms. Roundtree, you